Before we dive in, if you love mysteries that keep you staring at the screen long after the video ends, hit that subscribe button. You're about to step into a case that investigators still whisper about. The story begins on a cold October morning when the quiet town of Redmond Valley woke to a discovery that would unsettle everyone for months. At 6:14 a.m., a local hiker dialed emergency services after spotting something unusual at the base of a service road leading into the woods. It wasn't the car itself that caught his attention. It was the way it sat perfectly angled, as if someone had parked it in a hurry and never planned to return. The car belonged to Evan Marlowe, a 29-year-old data analyst who hadn't shown up to work the previous day. At first glance, nothing about the vehicle suggested a struggle. The doors were unlocked, the headlights were still faintly warm, and the driver's seat was pushed back slightly, as if someone taller had been behind the wheel. The keys were not in the ignition. The car wasn't damaged. But there was a detail investigators couldn't ignore. On the passenger seat lay Evan's phone, wiped clean of fingerprints. Detective Lena Hart, the lead on the case, arrived moments later. She had seen unusual disappearances before, but this one felt different. There was a strange silence around the scene, the kind that makes even the wind hesitate. Evan wasn't the type of person who vanished. No criminal history. No debts. No open conflicts. Nothing to suggest he'd walk into the woods alone at dawn and simply disappear. Inside the car's cup holder sat a folded piece of paper. No name. No handwriting on the outside. Hart slipped on gloves and unfolded it carefully. 3 words stared back at her, written in a hurried, uneven scrawl. Look where it ends. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a note of panic. It was guidance. A direction. Almost like a clue someone wanted them to find. Forensics canvassed the area, but there were no footprints, despite the soft dirt. No tire tracks besides Evan's. No signs that anyone had gone deeper into the woods. Everything looked untouched, almost staged. To Hart, it didn't feel like someone had vanished. It felt like someone wanted the scene discovered. The first lead came from a traffic camera positioned on Old Willow Bridge, 2 miles from the abandoned car. Footage from 4:03 a.m. showed Evan's car slowing down unexpectedly before accelerating again, but the driver wasn't Evan. The figure in the driver's seat was taller, bulkier, and wearing a hood. But the most disturbing part wasn't who was driving. It was the fact that Evan's silhouette was visible in the back seat, unmoving. Investigators replayed the footage again and again, zooming in to catch any details. What they found deepened the mystery. The driver made no attempt to hide the car from cameras. No attempt to avoid being seen. It was almost as if they wanted to be recorded. Back at the scene, Hart's team discovered something else. Something that shifted the entire direction of the investigation. 20 yards behind the car, half buried under a layer of pine needles, lay a second phone. Not Evan's. A burner phone. The type used by someone who didn't want to be traced. When tech analysts powered it on, they found exactly one thing inside. A single pin location. A point deep in the woods. About a mile from where the car was found. Hart's instinct screamed that this was no coincidence. Someone had left the phone there intentionally. The message was clear. Follow the trail. But as the team pushed through the trees toward the marked location, the air grew heavier. The forest grew quieter. The kind of silence you feel, not hear. And when they finally reached the coordinates, Hart stopped cold. Because the clearing they stepped into wasn't empty. It was waiting. And the thing lying in the center of it made every investigator freeze in place. For a long moment, no one in the clearing said a word. The early light filtered through the branches in narrow beams, landing on the object placed neatly at the center of the open space, a black backpack. It wasn't torn, damaged, or hidden. It was positioned carefully like a message, a symbol, a warning. Detective Lena Hart stepped forward slowly, her pulse steady but alert. The forest around them was still, unnaturally still, as if the trees were holding their breath. She crouched beside the backpack, examining the ground. No footprints. No drag marks. No indication of who placed it there or when. The soil was undisturbed. Almost too perfect. Bags clean, the forensic tech said quietly. No prints on the exterior. Hart nodded. Let's see what's inside. They unzipped the backpack carefully, expecting tools, clothing, maybe a map. But the contents were far stranger. Inside, they found a small notebook, a silver key, a folded map of Redmond Valley, and a single Polaroid photo. That last item made the entire team lean closer. The photo showed a wide shot of the forest, the same forest they were standing in now, taken from a distance. But in the lower corner of the image, partially obscured by leaves, was a blurry reflection, almost like a fragment of a face. Someone watching, someone hiding. But the most important detail wasn't the reflection. It was the handwritten message scrawled along the bottom edge of the photo. You're getting close. The note inside Evan's car said, look where it ends. This message said you're getting close. Whoever orchestrated this wanted the investigation to continue. They were guiding it. Detectives examined the notebook next. The pages were blank except for the first one, where a single date was written. October 12th, the day before Evan disappeared. And below it, a timestamp, 11:47 p.m. Let's check phone records. Traffic cameras. Anything around that time, Hart said. But then she noticed something else. The silver key. It wasn't a house key. Not a car key. It looked like a storage unit key, the small rectangular type used for rental lockers, personal vaults, or old office archives. On the side, engraved almost too faintly to see, were the numbers 317B. Storage facility codes often use letters. This was no coincidence. The team immediately split. Half returned to base to begin digital tracking, and Hart took the key to check every storage facility in Redmond Valley. Only one had units with alphanumeric labels, Brookstone Storage, an aging but well-kept compound on the west side of town. When Hart arrived, the manager hesitated the moment she showed him the key. That's odd, he said. 317B was rented 2 months ago. Cash payments. No listed name. No ID. Anyone access it recently? Hart asked. The manager swallowed. Yesterday morning, before sunrise. That timing aligned too perfectly with Evan's disappearance. As Hart walked down the dim corridor toward Unit 317B, the fluorescent lights above flickered in irregular pulses. The air smelled faintly of dust and cold metal. The walls felt tight and suffocating, the type of space where secrets fit too neatly. She slid the key into the lock. For a moment, she hesitated. Not out of fear, but because every instinct told her the person behind this wanted her here. Wanted her to open this door. Wanted the investigation to follow their script. The key turned smoothly. The door creaked upward. Inside, the storage unit was almost completely empty. No crates. No equipment. No signs of personal belongings. Just a single wooden table placed in the center, and on top of that table, a small black recorder, already switched on. A tiny red light blinked slowly. Waiting. Hart approached with measured steps. She pressed play. A man's voice filled the room. Quiet, steady, almost eerily calm. Detective Hart, you're late. The team watching from outside froze. The voice continued. If you want to find Evan, stop chasing shadows. Follow the truth he tried to hide. Evan? Hiding something? Hart leaned closer as the recording ended with one final whisper. Look behind you. She turned instantly and saw something that made her heart stop. Detective Lena Hart spun around. Her instincts braced for an attacker, but the storage unit behind her was empty. The hallway was quiet, the shadows still. No footsteps. No movement. No sign that anyone had slipped inside. But something had changed. On the floor just outside the doorway lay a small envelope that hadn't been there before. Hart's pulse tightened. Whoever placed it had been close enough to hear the recorder play, close enough to watch her reaction. She approached the envelope slowly. Her team gathered behind her, tension sharp in the air. Across the front, in the same jagged handwriting as the earlier messages, were 2 words. Final step. Inside was a photo, a recent one. It showed Evan, sitting at a metal table in what looked like a dimly lit room. His expression wasn't fearful, but it wasn't calm either. It was conflicted. Tired. The kind of look someone gives when they're hiding something they can no longer carry alone. Pinned to the corner of the photo was a single GPS coordinate. Hart's breath stilled. The coordinate pointed to Old Harbor Pier, a long-abandoned waterfront at the edge of town. The place had once been a bustling shipping hub, but now it stood mostly deserted, a stretch of creaking boards, empty warehouses, and dark water. Exactly the kind of place someone could stage a final act. Hart's team moved quickly. Within minutes, patrol cars and unmarked SUVs rolled toward the waterfront, the morning fog hanging low over the harbor like a curtain waiting to be drawn back. There was no wind, no sound except the distant groan of old wood. The pier felt like a place holding its own secrets. The GPS point led them to Warehouse 2, a rusted metal structure with broken windows and a sagging roof. A faint glow seeped from inside, a single light source flickering in the darkness. Hart signaled her team. Approach slow. Eyes sharp. We have no idea who else is in there. They entered cautiously. The warehouse smelled of old rope, seawater, and dust. The light came from a lamp on a table in the center of the room, and seated beside it, wrists free, head bowed, was Evan Marlowe.
Alive.
Hart stepped forward. Evan, can you hear me? He lifted his head. His eyes were red, tired, but wide with a mix of relief and something deeper, something heavier. You came, he whispered. Who brought you here?
Hart asked.
Who's been leaving the clues? Evan swallowed hard. I did. The warehouse fell into stunned silence. You? Hart repeated. Evan, your car was abandoned. You were seen in the back seat. Someone else was driving. No, Evan said quietly. That was me too. The team exchanged confused glances. Evan explained, voice shaking but steady enough to be truthful. For months, he had been gathering financial documents exposing a quiet but massive fraud operation involving a private firm he once contracted for. When he realized the scheme reached into places he couldn't trust, including people with influence and money, he feared reporting it directly. He needed investigators he could trust, ones who wouldn't be bought, silenced, or manipulated. So he staged his own disappearance, left clues deliberately, created a trail only dedicated investigators would follow. The burner phone, the backpack, the storage key, the recording, all of it. I wasn't running from someone, Evan said. I was trying to lead you to someone. Hart stepped closer. Who? Evan pointed to a small locked case beside the table. Inside were documents, financial logs, emails, shell company records, evidence pointing to a sophisticated laundering ring. But the name at the top of the chain made Hart's stomach drop. A city official. One who had publicly condemned corruption for years. One who had stood beside Hart during dozens of press conferences. One she trusted. As Hart stared at the evidence, footsteps echoed from outside the warehouse. Not from backup, from someone approaching with purpose. The door creaked open, and standing in the frame was the official whose name was on every document.
His voice was calm.
Steady. Controlled. You weren't supposed to get this far, he said. Hart reached for her radio, but the official raised a hand, not threatening, just resigned. It doesn't matter now, he said. The truth was always going to surface. Evan just sped it up. Backup swarmed the pier seconds later, and the official didn't resist. He simply lowered his head as officers moved in. The case broke open. The fraud ring collapsed. Evan was cleared publicly, but his life was permanently changed. As cameras flashed and reporters surrounded the scene, Hart felt that familiar ache in her chest, the reminder that the biggest threats often come from the places we trust most. That night, she filed her report and closed the case. But 3 weeks later, a small package arrived at her office. Inside was a single photograph. The same forest clearing, the same angle, but this time, the reflection in the corner wasn't blurry. It was clear. Someone else had been watching the entire investigation unfold. And they weren't done. If you think this case was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.